It started with a moment of embarrassment. One cold evening in 1949, Frank McNamara sat at a Manhattan restaurant called Major's Cabin Grill. He'd invited important clients for dinner, a celebration of new business. When the check arrived, McNamara reached into his jacket and realized he'd forgotten his wallet. His face flushed, his stomach sank. His wife had to rush across town to pay the bill. That night, McNamara swore he'd never face such humiliation again. Within months, he returned to that same restaurant with a small piece of cardboard in his hand. The world's first credit card. He called it the Diners Club card. The idea was simple. Pay with a card now, settle the balance later. But behind that convenience was a concept far more powerful, one that would quietly reshape civilization itself. The Diners Club began as a luxury for the elite. Only 200 people held the first version. It allowed them to eat, travel, and enjoy life without carrying cash, a symbol of trust, status, and sophistication. But soon, that small car evolved from convenience to revolution, because McNamara's invention didn't just solve a dinner problem. It solved capitalism's biggest challenge, how to make people spend more than they had. By the mid-1950s, the idea had spread. American Express, one of the shipping company, saw the future in finance and launched its own card. Banks joined in. Visa and MasterCard were born. The slogan was freedom. Buy now, pay later. But in truth, it was a new form of control. For the first time in history, ordinary citizens could access money they didn't own, and the system discovered something extraordinary. Debt made people consume endlessly. Before credit cards, spending was physical. You held cash. You watched it disappear. You felt the weight of limitation. But with plastic, the act of payment became abstract. You no longer felt the pain of spending, just the pleasure of acquisition. Psychologists would later call this decoupling, the separation between cost and emotion. You weren't paying anymore. You were participating in a dream. That dream built the modern economy. In the 1960s and 70s, as America grew wealthier, credit cards spread across every corner of life. The middle class embraced them as tools of status and comfort. Owning a card meant you belonged to the future, a world of possibilities and prestige. Banks sent cards by mail to millions, unasked for, as symbols of trust. What they were really sending was debt. Because for banks, every swipe was profit. Interest on unpaid balances, transaction fees, late penalties. A system so elegant it made debt itself a business model. The more people borrowed, the richer the lenders became. And unlike old loans that ended when paid off, credit cards never truly closed. They renewed month after month, generation after generation. Credit was no longer a bridge between paychecks. It became a way of life. People financed furniture, holidays, education, even weddings. Living on credit turned from shame into normality. Television ads romanticized it. Happy families, shiny cars, the promise that your dreams were only a card away. And the bank smiled, because for every dream financed, there was an interest rate attached. By the 1980s, credit cards were everywhere. The economic boom of Reagan's America turned plastic into a patriotic symbol. Spending was celebrated as civic duty. Consumption became the heartbeat of the system, and credit was its lifeblood. Banks targeted students, homemakers, and workers alike, promising empowerment while engineering dependency. Behind the glossy marketing, algorithms began to appear, primitive at first, then sophisticated. Credit scoring emerged, turning human lives into numerical profiles. Risk became quantifiable. A single number could now decide if you could buy a home, study at a university, or even get a job. The card in your pocket was no longer just a tool. It was your identity. And yet, the deeper truth was darker. Every convenience had a cost. As spending increased, savings vanished. As debt soared, freedom shrank. Millions lived under the illusion of wealth, carrying invisible chains of interest. The global economy grew dependent on that illusion, because without credit-fueled consumption, growth would collapse. By the 1990s, the world was addicted. The phrase cashless society wasn't just a prediction, it was an agenda. Governments encouraged card payments to monitor transactions and control inflation. Banks introduced rewards, air miles, cashback, points. transforming debt into a game. But beneath the surface, the same truth pulsed. The system worked best when you owed. Credit cards had rewritten the social contract. Work no longer funded life. Debt did. The promise of the future was mortgaged to pay for the present. The plastic rectangle in your hand represented faith. Faith in tomorrow's income. Faith in the system. Faith that it would all keep spinning. And for decades, it did. If you enjoy uncovering how inventions like this, seemingly simple, almost accidental, can reshape entire civilizations and redefine human behavior, make sure to subscribe and leave your thoughts below. Because in the second half of this story, you'll see how that small piece of plastic became the beating heart of the modern economy and how it turned freedom into dependency. By the time the new millennium began, the credit card had stopped being an innovation. It had become an ecosystem. What started as a promise of convenience had turned into the invisible infrastructure of daily life. From the grocery store to the internet checkout page, from airline tickets to hospital bills, plastic had become the passport to modern existence. Without it, participation in society itself felt impossible. But something fundamental had shifted. The credit card was no longer about credit. It was about data. Every purchase became a clue, every transaction a pattern. Banks, retailers, and tech companies learned more about who people were by what they bought than by what they said. The card became a mirror of desire, fear, and identity. In boardrooms, analysts didn't see customers. They saw algorithms of consumption. The transformation was profound. What had once been a simple tool for deferred payment became a surveillance device wrapped in convenience. Every swipe told a story. Where you went, what you ate, how often you traveled, what brand of happiness you preferred. It was not just about money. It was about behavior. And with that data came power. Credit card companies didn't just lend. They predicted. They began adjusting limits, interest rates, and offers using behavioral patterns. The system learned how to push just enough temptation to keep people loyal, indebted, and predictable. Meanwhile, the psychological machinery behind credit spending had reached perfection. Decades of marketing and design had trained the human brain to associate cards with freedom, status, and identity. The physical feel of the card, its weight, its shine, became a form of self-expression. Gold, platinum, black. Colors that once symbolized nobility now defined consumer hierarchy. The card in your hand told the world how successful you were, even as it quietly sold your future for 20% APR. Then came 2008, the year the illusion cracked. When the global financial system collapsed, the public blamed Wall Street derivatives and subprime mortgages. But at the heart of the collapse was a culture built on easy credit. Millions have been living on borrowed money, not just for homes, but for everything: food, gas, life itself. The banks had lent freely. The people had spent freely, and the system had believed its own illusion of infinite growth. When the bubble burst, households across the world woke up to a simple truth. Debt wasn't just a financial instrument. It was a form of dependence. The card that once promised freedom had become a leash. But even then, the lesson didn't last. Governments bailed out the lenders. Central banks printed new money, and interest rates fell to zero. The machine restarted. And as consumers recovered, so did their spending. This time more digital, more seamless, more invisible than ever. By the 2010s, swiping had become tapping. Plastic turned into pixels. Apple Pay, Google Pay, and online credit systems took the invisible nature of money one step further. There was no longer even a card, just data, codes, and trust in unseen networks. Debt had become so frictionless that it barely felt real. The irony is striking. The credit card was born from a moment of human forgetfulness, a man leaving his wallet at home. But its legacy is a world that forgets the meaning of money itself. In a cashless society, the boundaries between ownership and obligation blur. You don't see what you spend. You don't feel what you owe. Everything is subscription, revolving balance, monthly statement. Debt has become the water we swim in, invisible, omnipresent, and quietly corrosive. But beyond the economics lies the cultural transformation. Credit changed how we think about time. It reversed the order of life. In the past, you worked first and consumed later. You earned before you spent. The card turned that rhythm upside down. Now you consume first and pay later, sometimes much later, sometimes never. The future became collateral. Every purchase a small promise to your future self. Every balance a silent negotiation with tomorrow. And yet, society celebrates it. Advertisements don't talk about cost. They talk about experiences. Banks no longer sell debt. They sell identity. What's in your wallet? One campaign asks. The message is clear. Who you are is defined not by what you own, but by what you can borrow. Behind the glamour, the mechanics remain brutal. Compound interest ensures that most balances never truly vanish. Revolving credit turns short-term loans into lifelong obligations. For the wealthy, credit cards offer points, luxury lounges, and rewards. For the poor, they offer late fees and penalties. The same system that promises opportunity also manufactures inequality. And yet, people keep swiping. Because the genius of the system is emotional. It doesn't need coercion, it sells dreams. Every purchase whispers, "You deserve this." Every reward point says, "You've earned it." The system doesn't just manipulate wallets, it manipulates worth. In the digital age, this dynamic has gone global. Developing nations leapfrog straight into mobile credit, skipping cash altogether. Microloans, instant approval apps, and digital cards have turned billions of new consumers into debtors. It's no longer a Western phenomenon, it's planetary. Credit has become the most successful cultural export in history. And as artificial intelligence enters the financial world, the next phase is already here. Algorithms now analyze tone of voice, location, and even typing speed to decide creditworthiness. The line between finance and surveillance dissolves. Debt becomes not just a reflection of your finances, but of your behavior, your psychology, your reliability as a cog in the machine. The story of the credit card, then, is not really about money. It's about control disguised as freedom. It's about turning dreams into data and data into profit. It's about how one accidental invention reprogrammed human behavior, rewired economies, and defined modern life. The small piece of plastic in your wallet or the invisible digital card in your phone is not just a tool of convenience. It's a quiet contract with the system. It promises you comfort today in exchange for tomorrow's labor. It grants you access, but never ownership. It offers you status, but only while you remain obedient to its rhythm. And perhaps the most profound truth of all is this. The credit card didn't just change humanity. It revealed humanity. It showed what people truly value. Not wealth, but the illusion of it. Not patience, but pleasure. Not freedom, but comfort. The future of money may be digital, but its essence remains the same, a promise written on trust, powered by desire, and repaid with time. So the next time you tap your card, remember, you're not just buying something. You're buying a moment of illusion, financed by your future.